Welcome back, all you marks, to the House of Kayfabe. I am, of course, the other Steve, and today's episode is from the vaults of the House of Kayfabe. Before we moved our operation onto YouTube, we were a podcast-only entity, and this comes from that era, which is why there is no video. But I listened back to it, and I thought that it is a really fun episode. It is all six of us, all the regular residents of the House of Kayfabe, arguing and sometimes agreeing about who is on the Mount Rushmore of wrestling. On this episode, we've got Brian Resner, we've got Stephen P. New, Adam Harris, Matt Mullins, myself, and, of course, the human wrestling encyclopedia, Derek Jones himself. Again, there's no video. Please watch this episode or listen to this episode. I love it. This was back before most of us had met. I hadn't met Stephen P. New in real life. I didn't know he was a real person, and I didn't know Brian Resner. Hadn't met him yet. This is before we all met at WrestleCade last year. And just a reminder, we are going to be at WrestleCade this year. We're going to have a star-studded table full of superstars and wrestling luminaries. Please come out and see us. But before that, we're trying to build a brand around here, y'all, and we need your help if you like what we're doing. And I think that we're pretty good. I think we're pretty good at this. Please give us a like, a comment, and share. Just word of mouth. Tell people of the 5,000 wrestling podcasts out there that we're something a little special, because I think we are. So I hope you all enjoy the House of Kayfabe's Mount Rushmore episode.
House of Kayfabe Special Edition, the final Mount Rushmore. We are back here on the House of Kayfabe, and today we are going to dissect a very popular topic. Everybody in the podcast game and any other type of game have talked about this subject of who are the final four for the Mount Rushmore of professional wrestling. And I had to bring in a whole cast of people to have this conversation, because we have to have an elite super fan panel to come to a definitive four. So today I have got the one and only Adam Harris. I have also got Stephen P. New. I've got Derek Jones. I've got Matt Mullins. I've got Steve Barker. I have an entire cast of people. And Stephen P. New, you are with me right now too. So let's, and I know Stephen P. New thinks that this segment, this entire conversation is just something that shouldn't even be done. Stephen P. New, Mount Rushmore. I'm excited to find the final four. Are you?
I am as well. As I mentioned in our chat earlier, I have a little bit of objection because I think Mount Rushmore is a bad analogy. All right. For instance, Teddy Roosevelt was the 26th president of the United States. He commissioned Mount Rushmore, had himself put on it, by the way, right, which is a totally pro wrestling thing to do. But there have now been 20 presidents since Teddy Roosevelt. So if you think about, those first presidents came along, that was 120 years, 125 years of the country. And there's now been almost that same amount of time since, with 20 other presidents. So to me, I think Rushmore's a bad analogy. But if you guys want to go with it,
I'll say this. I'll say this. Instead of the actual Mount Rushmore, let's just say that this is the four most influential. Your four most influential, not my top four, not your top four, but the top four. By facts, and putting up the facts and everyone agreeing on four of the most influential people in professional wrestling. When you talk about
not necessarily Mount Rushmore, that if you were going to create a Mount Rushmore of the sport of professional wrestling, this is who would be there.
Yeah,
all right, I got another devil's advocate to go with you then.
Well, real quick, let's talk about your devil's advocate to begin with, the Teddy Roosevelt. When you're talking about Teddy Roosevelt put himself on Mount Rushmore, is that like, is Cody Rhodes the Teddy Roosevelt of professional wrestling?
I kind of saw it more as McMahon because, Vince McMahon was a wrestling company owner.
Yeah.
And he did some things. Then he created the Mr. McMahon on-air character. So I kind of see Vince McMahon as more the Teddy Roosevelt.
Maybe so, but I really think it could be Cody because he's totally putting himself on the mountain right now. He's definitely putting
a modern-day Rough Rider, I'll tell you that much.
What people don't know yet is this is the newest AEW faction. It's all of us.
We are in the new
signed.
Man, I hope
just be a lone wolf in fucking AEW. Apparently,
I hope that we can get over before the next faction comes out. That's just what I'm hoping.
Next week.
Yeah. Well, actually, I think one just came out.
QT.
Oh wait! Another one just came out. I just seen it break on AEW.com. There are 6 new factions since we started this segment here today. Who knows how many will be there by the time that this show's over.
Christian Cage is the only unaffiliated wrestler in AEW.
Yeah.
Oh man, you should have checked the breaking news. Christian now has a faction, and no, I'm just kidding. I'm just kidding.
By the dirt sheets again.
Yes, boom. So, what are the factors? Is what we need to talk about. I think actually, let's talk about your second devil's advocate. What is your second devil's advocate, Steve New?
We don't all know. So, if someone brings up someone tonight, say from a time period that we're not all familiar with, we may need a little time here, Brian Resner, to access our phones, our computers, our tablets, or whatever to do some real-time comparison of things like draws, years they've held the belts, crowds, money earned, things like that. Because I think above and beyond all else, we need to be having apples to apples comparisons, not just subjective. This is who,
I can totally see what you're saying.
Adam Harris or whoever would put on Mount Rushmore.
I can totally see what you're saying, but I can also look at this panel of super fans and know that not every single one of us may have lived through every single part of wrestling, but all of us know who Luthez is. All of us know who Bruno Sammartinos is. All of us know who Ray Stevens is. So there are lots of people that maybe we didn't live through that we know the legacy of that we can discuss here today to figure out who was on that top 4. Derek Jones, I mean, you're probably the youngest fan here. Would that be right?
Yes, and I feel like what Steve is trying to say is Derek is younger than the rest of us. He doesn't know what's going on. But in reality, I got it, Steve. I promise. I'm with you. I told you.
You know I got nothing but love for you, even though I watched wrestling 15 years before you were even born.
I'm watching the Chi-Town Rumble right now from 89. I got it, man. I'm watching it.
I'm pretty sure he watches more wrestling than anybody in here.
Yeah, well, that's true. Derek Jones definitely consumes more wrestling on a daily basis than anyone else.
He's like the Tool fan of wrestling.
That's fair.
Fair comparison.
So,
fair.
Question for you guys is, where does this conversation start? Because you want to start it, because when you say Mount Rushmore of wrestling, first 4 names that come to mind to any modern fan would be Steve Austin, The Rock, Hulk Hogan, Ric Flair. But you can't go with those 4 because it's a lot more complex than that to make this decision of the 4 most influential people in wrestling. So I guess really what we should start with is Ric Flair. Does Ric Flair get on Mount Rushmore? I think he should definitely be the first name we talk about because he's the first name that come to mind when people say the greatest wrestler of all time. So is Ric Flair, well, we'll start with you, Derek Jones. You're the youngest. Is Ric Flair on this mountain?
No.
You say no. And to me, that's crazy. I mean, it's just insane. Steve,
Insane.
He's young, kids. Man, he can't help it. Like in his defense, he probably saw like Ric Flair wrestling in a fucking t-shirt and Impact. You know,
Starrcade 95 instead of 85.
No, that's great that you're going back and getting
sees Ric Flair impregnating Lacey Evans, and he goes with the last
he
has seen and judges from that.
And Ric Flair just getting cucked by Charlotte on like 5 different occasions. So I mean, I understand the young guy not getting it. I'm going to be understanding.
I'll tell you what, I'm going to start out and say 16 times, man. 16 times the world heavyweight champion. And when people think about professional wrestling, they think about Ric Flair, which is a bigger thing than if they think about Hulk Hogan or John Cena or anything like that, because Ric Flair was not made by the WWE machine. He's his own man. He was in the South and still got national, world renowned. Everybody knows who Ric Flair is. Everybody in every country. So to me, I mean, maybe I'm wrong. Let's tag a lawyer in on this. Stephen P. New, Ric Flair, can you state his case on why he belongs on this mountain?
I think from the longevity of his career, how well he did it at the top of the game for so long, and then his ability to stay relevant for a longer an even longer period of time. There's a reason why he is beloved in pop culture. Snoop Dogg talks about how much he loves Ric Flair. Ric Flair had a rap song about him,
like 6 of them.
Just the last couple.
Oh, he's been talked about in rap songs for decades.
But he's had rap songs. I mean, he's probably got 6 that are just about him. Period.
Sure.
Not to mention rock songs.
Icon.
There's rock songs.
He is a cultural icon who, at one period of time, from about 1979 or 80, whenever he won his first title, up through whenever he won his last world title, was relevant. Then he comes around into WWE for, Act 2, Evolution, and, goes out on an incredible swan song. So, you talk about all of the wrestlers that he put over, all of the wrestlers who patterned themselves in one way or another after him, plus the 16-time world championship, plus the 8 60-minute matches a week for a very long period of time. So that's why for the modern era, Ric Flair's got to be in the discussion at least.
Derek Jones, after hearing that little bit of argument, because there's plenty more where that came from, but after hearing that little bit of argument, Derek, how do you make the argument that he shouldn't be?
All right, so let's dissect everything you just talked about. And I don't disagree that Ric Flair should be in the conversation. You asked me if he belonged on the mountain, and I'm still saying no. The first thing is his pop culture reference. You said there's a rap song about him. Yeah, there was one about Booker T, too. I heard it from Bad Bunny, and it was horrible. It doesn't mean that Booker T belongs on Mount Rushmore. 16-time world champion.
You would have expected that about Booker T, maybe. You wouldn't expect that about a guy who was 68 years old at the time. Ask yourself that, Derek Jones, whether 10 or 15 years after Booker T's career is over, there's still rap songs, whether Adidas is releasing a sneaker after Booker T.
I mean, but really none of these factors puts him on the Mount Rushmore of professional wrestling. What puts him on the Mount Rushmore of professional wrestling is the impact he's had on wrestling and on wrestling fans. And as a wrestling fan, me personally, I'm in the sales business. That's what I do every day is I sell things to people. And you know what I do to get jacked up in the morning when I'm ready to go and just tackle the sales market? I listen to Ric Flair promos because they jack me up because he's the greatest salesman of all time. I'm sold 100% on Ric Flair being on the mountain.
I think to reiterate what Stephen P. and Rez said is it's not just Ric Flair's achievements in wrestling, it's the overall effect on the world. Like who else has a catchphrase that's just woo and instantly everybody knows what it is. That's the impact. So I think that's.
But you said it's not even just his accomplishments in wrestling, but it is his accomplishments in wrestling too. Not just his effect on everything, but it's his accomplishments as well.
People that didn't know anything about wrestling into wrestling just by like, who is this woo guy, or who is this jet plane riding? Like I want to research that, and it gets people involved in wrestling. Is that lure of Flair?
But okay, so Derek, finish your argument here. Why should Ric Flair not be on Mount Rushmore?
All right, so we talked about the rap song. Then you went into the 16-time world champion. Are you going to put John Cena on the Mount Rushmore?
That's a good point.
Now it's void.
Is it void? Is it void because what's more of an accomplishment? 16-time world champion from the time that Ric Flair was champion, or 16-time world champion in a modern WWE world?
Adam Harris, you are the only man who's not talked yet, and I'm pretty sure probably Steven knew and Rez has probably met him, but Adam Harris has had Ric Flair at his birthday. Adam Harris, tell them what's up.
I think you have to start it with Ric Flair. I mean, I wrote down 4 criteria. It has to be a world champion, great talker, proven draw, and longevity. Flair has all of that stuff. And for me, if I'm building the Mount Rushmore, people are going to come and see that, right? And so it has to tell the story. With Flair, you've got the story of headlining 7 Starrcades. I counted, speaking of doing your research, 7 Starrcades headlining the first 7. Then you've got the story of the territories from Memphis to Mid-South to Mid-Atlantic to World Class. He went to all those places. Japan.
He's really the
last everybody.
Yeah. He's really the last of the territory champion, right? I mean, he's the last one, so that I think that says a lot too. Sorry, go ahead,
Derek. Really, like we keep going, and every time that someone comes in, they have more reasons. Adam just had 4 criterias for the Mount Rushmore. I've got like 20. Flair checks all my boxes too. Keep talking to me, Derek Jones. I mean, convince me that
he's like that dude that tries to tell you that the Beatles were overrated. That's where Derek Jones is right now. There's always that one curmudgeon motherfucker that's like, well, the Beatles aren't really that good. Okay, guy, tell me, Derek Jones.
Brian Wilson was a much better composer.
Listen, I would never say that about the Beatles. So you
tell me. Tell me. Look, man, there's some empirical evidences in the world. Like fucking water's wet. Me, you, and Rez are fucking bald, and fucking Ric Flair is one of the greatest ever.
Let's go back to Derek Jones.
He's not one of the greatest ever. And again, I'm not saying he doesn't belong in this conversation. All you asked me was, does he belong on Mount Rushmore? And to me, it's still a no. Because there are 4 other individuals that I can state a better case for.
Okay, so at least give us 1 or 2 of those.
And, well, I'll give you 3, and you'll probably agree with 3 of them. My 4th one, none of you are going to agree with, regardless of what type of information I give you.
Okay, just go ahead and give me the 4. Why don't you just give me the 4 that are better suits for Mount fucking Rushmore than Ric Flair?
All right, so and my disdain, but Hulk Hogan belongs on Mount Rushmore.
Of course, I think he's the next one on my list to talk about.
And I absolutely hate Hulk Hogan. But you want to talk about accomplishments? He's got the accomplishments. But most of all, he transcended wrestling. He took it somewhere that it probably would have never been had moves not been made with him or without him.
Suburban Commando.
He invented pay-per-view. He's the reason pay-per-view is a thing.
Yes. He transcended wrestling.
DMC. Bubba the Love Sponge.
Okay, so Hulk Hogan. Who's next?
I believe that The Rock belongs on Mount Rushmore.
Okay. He's definitely somebody that should be in the conversation.
Right. Another person that has transcended wrestling. He actually became bigger than the WWE, and not wrestling, but the entertainment WWE. He is bigger than the company that produced him, and that says something about it. I think Steve Austin belongs on Mount Rushmore.
The Rock, you have a longevity issue. That's the problem with The Rock. I am a card-carrying member of a fanatical Rock fan, but man, was he there for 10 years?
That's a good point. That is a very, very solid point, and I was actually going to bring that up as well. The Rock definitely is one of the greatest wrestlers of all time. However, how long did he spend in professional wrestling?
What? somebody going to look that up.
Well, and so, I mean, you could talk about telling the story of professional wrestling. That's a great one. And it would be hard to argue leaving that one out if you're going to say most recognizable, not necessarily the greatest worker in the world, and you would say the same thing about Hulk Hogan, And I think the other thing is it goes to Flair too. And I bet we would say this about Bret Hart too. Kind of had the same match 100 times. You can name a ton of great opponents, a ton of great matches that they drew money on, but Flair had a lot of the same great moves that we all know and love. Same with the Hitman. And The Rock, kind of set the stage for what became the 5 moves of doom. Where it was just like, okay, this is going to be my routine. Each and every time I do this, it's going to be a thing. And the crowd pops each and every time.
So he was only full-time from 96 to 2004. And then he was back from 11 to 13 sporadically. And then one shot in 2016. And that was the Cena match, maybe?
Yeah.
Right?
Okay, so it's hard to argue against. It's hard to argue against the impact of those few years, though. It's really hard to underestimate.
Right. And that's the thing, is he became that big of a star in that short amount of time. Longevity is a big deal because we want to see our favorites over and over and over. And I get it. We want them to always be around. But if you can compress that time frame and still get the same bang for your buck, that says a lot.
So who's the fourth guy that no one's going to agree with, Derek Jones?
So we'll get to him later. Let's keep going.
I really want to know who this guy is.
You're going to fucking say somebody like it's going to be Okada or it's going to be Kenny Omega or who's the other legendary Japanese
Giant Baba.
Inoki. The thing is, dude, that's a good point. Like having grown up with a step grandmother who was Japanese, who got me into Japanese wrestling as a kid. When Sechon moved here in '94, one of the few things that she kept on the wall that reminded her of her home country was a fucking 8x10 of Antonio Inoki. So if it depends. There's some parameters that have to be set here because Antonio Inoki is a god. He's Hogan plus that dude's been in the Japanese diet for decades. If you don't know what the Japanese diet is, that's their government. He wasn't like a flash in the pan once, I don't believe you. What's his name? Fucking the governor wrestling guy. Jesse the Body. Right. Jesse the Body was a politician for 4 years. Dude, Antonio Inoki, he negotiated for these terrorists to release Japanese victims or, what do you call it?
Prisoners of war.
Prisoners of war. That's where he's at.
And transcended pop culture with Muhammad Ali, right?
Right. Yeah. But I'm saying
at the time was a big deal.
If you want to talk about The Rock being whatever, no one's going to call The Rock to go to Iraq to get prisoners of war back. They sent Antonio Inoki. So
haven't you seen Young Rock? We're only
it's so bad.
Steps away from that.
So bad. Asian Wheaties. Yes, so bad. So
I want to know where Stephen New is on the Hulk Hogan thing.
Hogan's in the discussion just because of impact at the time. The Hulkamania era is undeniable to the sport of professional wrestling. And he, along with a promoter, completely changed the entire sport of professional wrestling. So I think Hogan's at least got to be in the discussion.
No, wait.
93,000 fans.
Does he have to be in the discussion at this point, or do we put him on the mountain? Because now Derek Jones said Hulk Hogan belongs on the mountain. You just said Hulk Hogan belongs on the mountain. Stephen Barker, did you say Hulk Hogan belongs on the mountain?
For me personally, no. But for if we're letting someone who's not a wrestling fan listen to this, and that's how I came across this, because my 4 is definitely going to probably include like Kurt Angle and Chris Jericho, but that's not reality. That's not reality, right? That's not I came across this thinking if we were going to let someone who doesn't know anything about wrestling, this would be this would be the way that they would find out about Tom Brady, Joe Montana, blah, 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 the other 2 quarterbacks, right? So, I never was a big, huge Hogan fan, Hulkamaniac. Where I grew up, we didn't have the ability to watch them. So the only time I ever watched him when I was a kid was I watched him on Saturday Night Main Event.
Okay,
so
the question,
I was never there.
But the question is, though, you can totally see why he belongs on the mountain Mount Rushmore, and you can totally agree with that, correct?
Yeah.
Adam Harris. Adam Harris, Hulk Hogan, you can agree with he's on the Mount Rushmore?
I say there's very little argument against putting Hulk Hogan on the Mount Rushmore.
Okay, Matt Mullins, do you think that Hulk Hogan belongs on the Mount Rushmore without a doubt?
Without a doubt, I was a Hulkamaniac.
Okay, well, then we can go ahead and fill that spot.
How much easier this would be, Resner? See how much easier this would be if you go 81 to 21, 40 years. All right, where it gets boring is from 80 back to 40.
Well, wait till we start talking about Stanislav Zbyszko. We'll be talking about him in Frank.
And honestly,
what I'm saying is,
if Jim Cornette heard what you just said, he would say you were full of shit, Stephen P. New.
To Derek Jones' point, I think it's pretty hard to argue against Hogan, Flair, Stone Cold, Rock.
That's the given. But that's the given one. That's the one that everyone says, and it can't be those four guys because it all can't come from that.
From 81 to 21.
I
have a hard time. I have a hard time putting Rock and Austin. Like for me, it's one or the other.
It's agreed.
I would have put HBK.
I think the same thing. It's like HBK or Brett, maybe. Like some people might be on either one of those, or maybe a Flair.
I believe that you can't do
or Michaels.
You know why you can't do HBK and Brett? And I'm a huge Shawn Michaels fan, and I'm a huge Bret Hart fan. I love both of them. They've been part of some of my greatest matches on my entire list. However, they were on top at a time when wrestling was dying. Like when Bret Hart and Shawn Michaels first started getting on top, they were a part of the next generation era, and the next generation era is a very unsuccessful era in WWE history. If not for the Attitude Era, it could have been the era that killed wrestling. So I don't think Shawn Michaels or Bret Hart can get on there because of that. Do you see my point there?
I agree. I completely agree. That's why I didn't put either one of them on there.
Steve New, do you think that I have some ground there to say Shawn Michaels and Bret Hart can't be on there because of the time that they had in the business where they were on top?
I agree, because and neither of those guys did what the four that I just mentioned did in terms of either transcending the business. You know, I know that Bret Hart thinks he's a better technical wrestler than Ric Flair. I don't believe he is. And then for the reasons that Derek Jones said, Stone Cold and then possibly The Rock or whoever else you want to make an argument about.
Okay, so
argue that Cena and not The Rock. I don't know.
All right, since you brought up Stone Cold again, and we've heard Stone Cold so many times, is Stone Cold like Hogan? Can we all agree that Stone Cold is going to be on the Mount Rushmore? Because of course Stone Cold is he's the savior of professional wrestling. He kind of ushered in the Attitude Era. He saved wrestling from a very dark time. And he became the biggest star to ever do it. So is Steve Austin definitely on Mount Rushmore? Steve New, I'll start with you. Steve, is Steve Austin there?
He's on my 81 to 21 Mount Rushmore. Yes.
We're not talking 81 to 21. Steve New, we're talking about professional wrestling as a whole, the entire thing. This is four people from the entire world, from Frank Gotch all the way to the fucking Young Bucks.
Nope.
So Steve Austin's not on there.
Not on mine.
Okay.
Wow.
Would you argue against Steve Austin being on it?
This is not going to be fair. He's a lawyer. He's going to win and not be right.
What's that?
I said, he's a lawyer. He's trained to do this. He's going to win and probably not be right. This is not going to
be. The beautiful thing they teach you to do in law school is argue both sides. I can argue as passionately about Stone Cold going on there as I can vehemently him not going on there.
That's what lawyers call ethics.
Okay, so we'll switch over to Stephen Barker. Stephen Barker, do you feel as if Stone Cold should be on Mount Rushmore, or would you argue against it?
Yes, he has sold more T-shirts than Tommy Hilfiger. This man has sold more T-shirts than any T-shirt of anybody ever. Right? There's people that probably have Austin 316 T-shirts that don't even know who the fuck he is. He also is a minor star outside of, dude, and not to be too wonky about it, he was fantastic in the WCW. He was great. He was great then. He just wasn't the star. So he has the work behind it as well.
I totally agree.
That's what I think about the difference between him and The Rock is The Rock, obviously, that dude burned brighter than anybody, but he burned real slow or real quick. Man, Stone Cold was great in the Hollywood Blondes, dude. And that was when the WCW was fucking terrible.
Oh, man, that's my favorite time in WCW, 92, 93.
Yeah, me too.
Okay, Adam Harris, would you argue against Steve Austin being on the mountain?
Here's how I stand on Austin, and I would include him, even though I feel like he may not have the worldwide recognition that The Rock has. Stone Cold did what Barker said, which was sold T-shirts, had amazing gimmicks his whole life, but also a couple bad ones. And so if you're telling me the story of professional wrestling, you can talk about the Ringmaster and how he overcame that and became the personality, turned up to 10 and changed the wrestling business.
I'll tell you one.
He also came from world-class championship wrestling. So again, I like that you can tell the territory story there. He was the TV champion for me. Like, I wondered if Steve Austin would ever lose the TV championship when I first started watching wrestling. And then Hollywood Blondes, man. I mean, for me, the work is there. And even in his latter period when the knees were blown and the neck was hurt, he still managed to have significant matches and sold out arenas. So again, longevity and draw. It's hard to argue against that.
A question that comes to mind is when you're talking about, The Rock belongs on there. Steve Austin belongs on there. Only one of them should make it through. The reason why you say only one of them should make it through, and that one I feel should be Steve Austin, is because would The Rock be what he is today without Stone Cold?
That's a great point. And I was going to say also, I didn't even say that, but I think Stone Cold captured that whole underdog who doesn't want to give a Stone Cold stunner to their boss, and that's the reason I think he just captured the attention of everybody.
Matt Mullins, would you argue against Steve Austin being on the Mount Rushmore of professional wrestling?
No, I would absolutely have Steve on there, and The Rock did not make mine. So I think you couldn't have both of them, and for the same reasons. I just think that the Stone Cold and Vince storyline was just, world shattering. Everybody was watching it right then, so I'm a Stone Cold fan.
All right, Derek Jones, would you argue against Steve Austin being on Mount Rushmore?
No, not at all. And 3-time Rumble winner. He's been on PWI #1 or the PWI 500, WCW TV champion, tag team champion, NWA tag team champion, WWF 6-time world champion. I mean, he belongs on Rushmore.
Okay, so everybody here agrees that Steve Austin belongs on Mount Rushmore except for Stephen P. New. So we go back to you. So you are the lone man out, which is a familiar territory for you. You kick the shit out of people all day, no matter how many are on the other side. So you've got an entire panel that says Steve Austin belongs on there. So go ahead, be the Derek Jones this time and make the argument of why Stone Cold Steve Austin does not belong on the Mount Rushmore.
How many times was he world champion and how long?
Does anybody have that information up? I think he's a 6-time world heavyweight champion.
6-time world champion.
For a total of how many years or days?
Over the course of probably like 4 or 5 years, right?
Yeah, a good portion of 4 to 5 years he was on top.
All right.
How many straight pay-per-views did he main event?
How many?
Point was King of the Ring also.
What main event happened during the Attitude Era once he got and became Stone Cold? When was he not in the fucking main event?
Who pretty much created tweeners?
I don't believe that. I don't believe that he's a tweener. That's
he was a tweener.
No, he was obviously a good guy.
No,
maybe he was doing bad guy shit, but he was doing bad guy shit against the boss.
At WrestleMania 13, he and Bret Hart did the.
I was just going to say that. Yeah, I was going to say he was definitely a heel against Bret Hart.
From WrestleMania 13 forward, he was a face.
Yeah, he wasn't a heel until he did the fucking corporate bullshit, and that was terrible.
Well, even then, when he did the WCW invasion stuff, he was still a face.
When he went into WrestleMania 13, he was a heel.
Yes.
He created that Bret Hart angle from being a heel.
But he wasn't a tweener. He wasn't a tweener then.
I felt like he was still a tweener.
Bret Hart was being booed and Stone Cold was being cheered. It was a rare double switch, WrestleMania 13.
It's a thing of beauty. It was
a thing of beauty,
match.
And there's a reason why that's my favorite professional wrestling match of all time.
Well, and I think for that reason, again, when you want to tell the story of professional wrestling, that's one of the matches that we would all mention. So if we're not going to put Bret Hart on there, even though he's got the Calgary connection. That goes into a whole nother thing with the family of wrestling that you could tell. We got to include Stone Cold.
Well, it's funny that you bring up Steve Austin versus Bret Hart, because without that match, man, WrestleMania 13 would be an absolute shit show. Yep. The entire fucking event was absolutely terrible except for that match. Awesome. And that match was so good that it made WrestleMania 13. Without it, WrestleMania 13 would go down in history as the worst WrestleMania of all time.
Just put me down for a maybe on Stone Cold, because I'm sitting here looking at some other guys.
Okay,
and I'm not.
So we're going to go.
I'm not arguing against Stone Cold on Mount Rushmore. All I'm saying is maybe, because I need to know who the other three are.
Well, this could bring us back. We all can probably name 4 or 5 specific Stone Cold matches that, were fantastic. Can we name 4 or 5 Rock matches that were of
that didn't have Stone Cold in them? That didn't have Stone Cold. That didn't have Stone Cold in them. Yeah, no.
And Hulk Hogan. That was it, man. That's the two that everybody.
And that match was terrible. I mean, that was not a good match.
It wasn't the kind of match that we seen from Steve Austin and The Rock, for sure. I think that everybody wanted that match to be amazing, and so the fans made that match amazing.
Yeah. Yeah, I watched it again a while ago. Actually, I did it when the Cornette did the watch along, and it's okay. It's a match.
So when it comes down to it, The Rock, to have that classic, amazing, awesome match, he has to be with a Mount Rushmore guy. Well, if we put Steve Austin on Mount Rushmore, which we're still in question there, and Steve New said he's got other guys that he could state a better case for. So just like Derek Jones and his other guys, did we even get that fourth one? I don't think we even got it.
Mysterious.
He's holding the fourth one still, but Steve New, give me some guys that belong on there more than Stone Cold.
All right, number one, I want to say this is the George Washington of any Mount Rushmore's Lou Thesz.
Lou Thesz is George Washington. See, now I believe that one of those guys have to be on there. One of those guys, whether it be Frank Gotch, Lou Thesz, Bruno Sammartino, one of those guys has to be there. And the question is, which one of those guys? And I happen to lean toward Bruno Sammartino.
Well, let me make the case for Lou Thesz.
Sure,
reading
I'm here.
Some of his bio. An official 6-time world champion. He held the NWA World Heavyweight Championship 3 times for a combined total of 10 years, 3 months, and 9 days, longer than anyone else in history. He was a true shooter.
Okay. Now, one thing I'd like to say to that is, can we really talk about the length of title runs in comparison to that time frame when it was very common for someone to hold the belt for like 3 or 4 years, and now when that is not even possible without losing your entire audience?
I think we're getting into, like, if you want to take this with other sports, like when people want to compare even if you wanted to like compare Tom Brady to someone not that long ago, like Troy Aikman, the game is so much different. The industry is so much different. I really, truly have no reference. I've never seen a fucking Lou Thesz match. I've never seen a Frank Gotch match.
I was about to say the same thing. Like, I can't name a Lou Thesz match or an opponent.
You know what I mean?
Really.
Like, who'd he ever beat?
Buddy Rogers, I guess.
Yeah.
And
someone else that is involved in this conversation should definitely be Ray Stevens. A lot of people consider Ray Stevens the greatest wrestler of all time, even over Flair.
And a West Virginian.
Yes.
No shit.
Yeah, he was born in Winfield, right?
No, it wasn't Winfield. Where was it? It was something like, you sent it to me, though. I thought it was like Point Pleasant or something.
Point Pleasant. Yeah, Point Pleasant.
I did not know that.
Yeah, I didn't know that either, man. Mullins pulled that out on me.
That Steve New might have something here, because before 81, I mean, shit, dude, I started watching wrestling in like 84.
I was going to say, for most people, the general population, like, wrestling starts at either WrestleMania 1 or Hogan and Andre. So, I mean, if you go before that, then you have to start talking about.
I feel like one of those spots has to be from that classic era. It has to be one of those guys like Lou Thesz, like Frank Gotch, like Bruno Sammartino, like Ray Stevens, someone like that. Steven, do you have any more things for Lou Thesz? Because 6-time world champion, even though it was 10 years back then, I think that a 6-time world champion that lasts for 4 years to 5 years is equivalent to that from that time frame.
He wrestled on a part-time basis from age 49 to age 62.
I mean, so is Jericho.
Major title in 1978 in Mexico, becoming the inaugural Universal Wrestling Alliance heavyweight champion at the age of 62. Tez officially retired in 79 after a match with Luke Graham. Remained retired for wrestling his last match, December 26, 1990, in Japan at the age of 74 against his protege, Masahiro Chono.
Man, I bet you that was a 5-star.
Oh man, I bet it was too. Masahiro
The only male professional wrestler, along with Abdullah the Butcher, to wrestle in 7 different decades.
Did Gypsy Joe not go 7 decades?
Nope. Abdullah the Butcher and Lou Thez.
Okay.
But Gypsy Joe was the oldest professional wrestler to ever step in the ring.
Right. So if you read his bio from the time, he predates the NWA, but he made his professional wrestling debut in 1932 at the age of 16, and then was the world heavyweight champion in 1948 National Wrestling Alliance. Okay. For my money, that old guy, and I may even put, Brian Resner, to your point, I may even put 2 old guys, pre-1980 guys, on my Mount Rushmore, because Thez is the NWA equivalent of that. Bruno is the WWF equivalent.
Actually, WWF.
Okay, yes. so I can totally get down with this idea of putting someone that is a founder of wrestling. But I don't know about 2. I'm not sure about 2, but I'm definitely listening to the argument.
You got George Washington and you got Abraham Lincoln.
That's Sputnik Monroe.
I want to say something about because Steven said it, and when you look at George Washington's Wikipedia, which I presume at least one of us did today, it says the enduring precedent, and you could argue that Thez might be. A lot of us might also say Flair. But if you are incorporating anything pre-70s, then what Steve just said is like, wow, well, that's a pretty big precedent.
Well, I feel like you're
from the founding of the NWA, and he was
and traveled.
He was the benchmark for it. Thez was the benchmark for guys like Harley Race, Jack Briscoe, Terry Funk, Dory Funk, all of those
Steve
guys
Austin
that came in the 60s and the 70s. Thez was their measuring stick.
I mean, even Steve Austin took a lot from Lou Thez. I mean, a lot of
Thez Press.
Lou Thez was definitely a very big staple in professional wrestling. I think that this kind of goes along with the Rock and Stone Cold type of conversation, where one of them can be on this Mount Rushmore. Is it Lou Thez or is it Bruno?
Well, here's my thing. And I just don't know about this. Because first of all, we were talking about, stick stuff, man, stick man shit. Did they even cut promos in the 40s? Do we even know that? Do we know if he's a good talker?
Watch Lou Thez versus Buddy Rogers, Steve Barker. Go on YouTube and watch Lou Thez versus Vern Gagne, a 55-minute match from Chicago. Go on there and watch Antonio Rocca versus Lou Thez. Some crazy good matches.
Hey, Derek Jones, what's Stone Cold's finishing maneuver?
The stunner.
What is Ric Flair's?
Figure 4.
What's Hulk Hogan's?
2-inch leg drop.
What's Frank Gotch's finisher?
Probably a half Nelson.
Sunset flip.
A toe pick, ankle pick.
But so if we're gonna get into these modern men of wrestling, I will 100% agree with Steve New on Lou Thez for one reason and one reason only. Regardless of everything else he did, Lou Thez is featured in almost every wrestling match you will watch today, because he is, if you really look into Lou Thez, he is a pioneer of most traditional wrestling maneuvers. Barker said the Lou Thez press. Well, look at your German suplex, invented as a work move by Lou Thez. Yep. A lot of your traditional wrestling maneuvers were invented by Lou Thez. So if we're going to put one on there, he
Derek, if I may, among his many accomplishments in the sport, he is credited with inventing a number of professional wrestling moves and holds, such as the belly-to-belly waistlock, later known as the German suplex, the Lou Thez press, step-over toe hold face lock, I believe that's called the STFU now, and the original power bomb. So when you're jacking your jaw over there with Stephen Barker about what was his
I mean, dude, hey.
He only invented all of them.
The gentleman from Cross Lanes would like to yield that we include Lou Thez.
Okay.
Dude, he said dude, of course the lawyer won this.
Yeah. Stephen P. New definitely.
Powerbomb.
Stephen P. New definitely put his case
right
down.
Now, when me and Steve New both agree on someone, they belong.
Okay. All right. So Derek Jones.
Because that's our bookends too. I mean, we've got the youngest and the longest watching fan on there.
Okay. So Derek Jones is a yes. Derek Jones is a yes on Luthez. Adam Harris is a yes on Luthez. Steve News a yes on Luthez. Because of Steve News' argument, I am a yes on Luthez. Matt Mullins, are you a yes on Luthez?
Man, I'm exhausted, and I submit to that. That was awesome. Yeah.
Okay. Stephen Barker.
By order of the court. Yes.
Okay, so all right, so we've got Luthez.
Gavel
is on the list.
Stephen P has to have a gavel somewhere, right?
Okay, so no. He's on the other side, Barker. He's on the other side of it. He don't have the gavel. He's the one that gets the gavel.
Now, the argument, I think there could be an argument made for Bruno. Possibly.
Of course, there
held
could
the
be.
WWF Heavyweight Championship for more than 11 years across 2 reigns. The first of which is the longest single reign in the promotion's history. He's a 2-time heavyweight champion.
Sold out the Garden more times than any human being ever.
Right, which is something that pisses me off because I've been to Madison Square Garden a number of times. They've got banners. They've got a lot of banners for the Knicks, for the Rangers. There's a banner honoring consecutive sellouts for Bruce Springsteen. There's a banner honoring consecutive sellouts by Billy Joel. There ought to be a banner up there for Bruno Sammartino. Anyway, my point was you could argue that Bruno is a WWF or WWF equivalent of Luthez. I don't know that he was as innovative. Maybe you do what Resner says and you put one of those old guys on there, Dez over Sammartino. I could argue either one probably. But then that only leaves you 2 spots to fill and not 3 spots to fill.
You got 2 spots, right.
Yeah.
And you also know what Ric Flair said about Sammartino. That dude never sold out anywhere outside of wherever he was big in Canada. Was it Montreal?
Probably Toronto.
It was Toronto or Montreal where he was a gigantic star, and he was a gigantic star in the Northeast, but that motherfucker didn't sell out the Cow Palace. He didn't sell out Greensboro. You know what I mean? Like, so
I would agree with that. I would agree with that too. Although I do love that Bruno has that international draw, and that was of the time period for sure. But if I'm going to
that's what made him so popular in the Northeast, were all those Italian immigrants and things. And you hear those stories about. There was a time where professional wrestling, when it was revealed that it was a work and not a shoot, they stayed in touch with the communities of color, interestingly. That's why you had world champions. Pedro Morales was a champion of color because the Puerto Ricans and the Hispanics, they loved the fact that they had a champion. Same with Sammartino. The Italians loved the fact. And it goes to Barker's point about Sammartino goes out to L.A. and can't hardly draw.
Right.
You know.
But he was big in either Montreal or Toronto. It's one of those two. He was as big as he was in New York City as he was there for the same reason.
And I don't think that he went to Japan the same way that like Bob Backlund's did and Bockwinkel's did. I don't think, somebody might correct me on that, but I don't think Bruno did as much in Japan, certainly, as any of those other guys we talked about.
Has anyone ever watched some Sammartino matches?
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
I understand.
To Koloff.
And I understand that there's, a difference of work rate. Man, those matches are fucking boring. Like, I think his finishing maneuver was a bear hug, wasn't it?
Well, I mean, there were times when Bruno Sammartino would keep the championship, and when his arm was raised, there'd be like 10 people in the Garden left because it would be like 4 a.m.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, and I think I can't help but wonder if one of the reasons there's no banners at Madison Square Garden is because somebody doesn't think you can verify those attendance records.
Well, there wasn't a Dave Meltzer back then to debunk. So they were able to just say whoever the fuck.
Do you think Dave Meltzer...
Especially from reading Ole Anderson's book, which I wanted to say one other thing about Luthez in relation to that book, but, the bookers were always cooking the numbers in one way or another, and I'm sure if anybody was guilty of that, it was New York.
It was that thing
of that.
It was that thing where they would tell the newspaper there was 25,000, but they would tell the locker room there was 8.
Exactly, and no receipts. I'm sure no receipts for anything. And, The thing that Ole Anderson said was whether nobody knew if Lou Thesz could shoot or not, but nobody was going to find out. And they all believed it.
It was a believable thing. And that's why Lou Thesz has his spot on this final Mount Rushmore. But we've got 2 more spots, gentlemen, and we're about 50 minutes in. This is a 2-parter already. So where is the parameter for these 2 spots that are left on Mount Rushmore, Steve New?
That's a good question. So we've got Stone Cold up there.
No, we don't. We have not gotten Stone Cold up there because you have not said that Stone Cold should be there. We have not unanimously decided on Steve Austin because of you, Stephen P.
I thought we were saying Flair and Thesz now. Are we?
I thought it was Hogan. I thought it was Hogan.
Hogan and Thesz are the only ones we have confirmed.
Oh, okay. Hogan and Thesz.
So, I mean, if we're confirming Flair and Austin, then we're done. But Stephen P. New had an issue with Steve Austin. Have we gotten anywhere with that?
Well, guys, for me, if the choice is, if it were put to me, Thesz, Hogan, Flair, Austin, I can't think of 4 more deserving.
Oh, wow. Okay, so Stephen P. New has now agreed to Steve Austin, so therefore everyone has agreed to Steve Austin, and we can put Steve Austin on this list. So Steve Austin, Hulk Hogan, and Lou Thesz are on our final Mount Rushmore, and we have got 1 more spot. Which that
it's
spot,
time for Derek Jones to tell us
that's
who's his 4th guy.
It is, because that
Tell
spot.
us about the guy that you saw down at the fucking VFW that should be on the fucking
where we
thing.
are then, Rez. 5 of 6 of us believe Flair should be
in that final spot. Yes,
of course.
And I can't think of one other person
as number 4.
I can't think of one other person that belongs in that final spot than Ric Flair, and I don't think that any of the rest of you can, but Derek Jones has one person on his list that should be on the Mount Rushmore other than Ric Flair, and I can't wait to hear this fucking name.
So, again, none of you are going to agree with it, so it's not really relevant. But based on in-ring abilities, based on career accomplishments, based on somewhat of longevity, still has time to go because he's current. If we're going on the other spectrum of Lou Thesz, I've got to stay, I've got to push forward into the future as well. And I'm going to go with a gentleman that has been the only gentleman to hold the NWA, TNA, IWGP, and WWE World Champion.
Oh, AJ Styles?
AJ Styles.
That's a, you know what? I really hate to argue against AJ Styles because I do think he's one of the greatest to ever do it.
Well, and to make it even better, one of the gentlemen that we just put on the Mount Rushmore of professional wrestling has stated that AJ Styles is the best professional wrestler on 2 feet today, living.
I agree with that statement 100%.
Stone Cold.
I agree. I agree with AJ Styles. I agree with him too.
I agree with all of that, but here is your rub. Here is your problem. If Stone Cold Steve Austin came to the Madison Civic Center, they would have to shut the whole town of Madison down. If Hulk Hogan did, it would have to shut the whole fucking town, whole county of Boone. If AJ Styles shows up, it's going to sell out, but that's about it because the motherfuckers at that Go Mart on your way there don't know who the fuck AJ Styles is. But they'll tell you when you're getting your cigarettes on the way to the Madison Civic Center, hey man, Stone Cold Steve Austin's at Madison Square fucking Civic Center, motherfucker. Like
they'd know, they would know who Ric Flair. They would know who Ric Flair is as well.
Yeah, Ric Flair, obviously. Of course.
They haven't watched Final Battle 04 or whatever.
No shit. That's my problem. I agree with Derek Jones. What the fuck? It must be April Fool's Day. But it must be. But I agree with him. But man, there's just a big old issue, man. I don't think AJ Styles sells the most t-shirts on fucking Raw. Or what is he on? Which one is he on?
He's on Raw. But
he probably don't sell the most t-shirts on fucking Raw.
Well, if this was a t-shirt Mount Rushmore, then that would matter. But here's the thing:
it goes to popularity.
When you're thinking about one more spot,
t-shirt Mount Rushmore wise, nobody from the Bullet Club in there because
because they're selling. You're right.
That shirt is ridiculous.
It's not about t-shirt sales though, and it's about a final spot.
The Bullet Club.
Here's a question. Here's a question: is AJ Styles, does he belong on there when there's only one spot left and Flair hasn't made it yet? Because I don't believe that AJ Styles would make it on Mount Rushmore over Ric Flair on AJ Styles' Mount Rushmore.
How many AJ Styles pay-per-view main events has there been?
I mean, a bunch.
A lot.
No, we're not counting Japan. We're not counting New Japan because we're not talking about Antonio Inoki. So we can't do that. It's not because if we're going to go Japan, you're going to go Inoki and Ricky Shizu.
You can't be selective on companies if you're just saying pay-per-views. So there's TNA pay-per-views, there's New Japan pay-per-views, there's WWE pay-per-views.
Does TNA pay-per-views count?
Yeah, they do.
You said pay-per-views.
That's a technicality. I mean,
I love AJ Styles. I think that your argument is worth talking about, but with one spot left, I don't think it's plausible. I think if there was 2 more spots left, I mean, you could discuss like Andre, you could discuss Dusty.
Oh, you just took mine.
So there's on PWI keeps a track of like how many wins a wrestler has, and for a long time, Flair held the record of most wins in a 2-year time frame until AJ Styles beat him.
I figured it would be most draws. I figured Ric Flair would have like the most draws. In that
yeah,
that's also
86.
Did anyone ever see Mick Foley bury Ric Flair in TNA? And he was like, I myself saw Ric Flair go 41 minute draw, and I was like, oh shit, that's a shot. He just made a shot on all those 60-minute fucking draws.
Well, I want to throw my wild card out there, and I know again this is not going to make it up there for most of you guys, but since Derek threw out his outlier, I think an argument needs to be made for Andre the Giant. And even though he may not have been always on top, and he was definitely not the greatest promo, unless you were in Montreal, Quebec, Canada.
Man,
can you include Princess Bride promos?
I would like to take. I would like to take this one. I would like to take this one and say that the reason why Andre is even being mentioned by you right now is because he was 7'2" and 505 pounds in a time,
which is an attraction.
And you can't teach that.
You sure can, but.
Stephen Amore.
Okay, now wait. Now, here's my argument. If Andre the Giant is 6'4", he's still a big man for sure, but he would have never sold a ticket. He would have never had longevity. He would have never been a professional wrestler. If he would not have been born a giant, he would have never stepped in the ring. He was in all aspects terrible, except for the fact that he was gigantic. That is why I do not believe that Andre the Giant should be on Mount Rushmore simply because he was born a certain way.
Okay, but if you're going to go work rate though, and if you want to go like way pre WrestleMania 3, back when Andre the Giant could actually move, like if you watch some of those older ones, like I watched it's on that Mid-South documentary where it's him in a three-way trios match, fucking 6-man with Dusty Rhodes and I think maybe JYD, and man, Andre the Giant was fucking throwing drop kicks.
He could work
at
one point, but man, he got like 500 pounds.
Wait, I bring up this same thing again. Did he have good work rate, or were you just shocked that the man that size could do a drop kick? It's a fucking drop kick.
He could do that not a lot of people could do.
Okay.
He was the attraction. Promoters, Vince McMahon Sr. had him and lent him out to other promoters because they knew as soon as they put him on the poster, they were selling out wherever they were.
Wherever he was.
They were selling out Logan. They were selling out Madison Square Garden. They were selling out the Forum in LA. They were selling out the Superdome in New Orleans. It didn't matter where Andre was. He was the draw.
And the line at the freak show at the circus is super long as well. It's the same concept. People wanted to see his size. They didn't go there to see his fucking drop kick.
Yeah.
So,
Go ahead,
is
Matt.
that any different than talking to people?
That's what
Dusty Rhodes talked them into the building.
I mean, you could say the same thing.
A bionic elbow and him grab his crotch.
You could say the same thing for the 2-inch fucking leg drop. Go ahead, Matt.
I mean, yeah, So I'm dating a girl that is not a pro wrestling fan, and she wants to know why I love it so much. And so I go back and I explain to her like the history of the circus sideshows. That's what wrestling came from. So the argument that he was just this big attraction, that's what wrestling is. That's why we love it. The theatrics, he embodies that. So I think that it's a big argument that he
also
could be up there.
And think of the people he drew in the building that other guys got to wrestle in front of. Think about all those big matches that he brought people in for, but a bunch of guys got to work in front of big houses because they got to be on the card with Andre.
Okay, so
he has cultural relevance because Matt Mullins' old lady who don't like wrestling, she loves him in Princess Bride. You know what I mean? Like that dude is loved by hundreds of every white girl in America loves Princess Bride. Whatever age, they all
want a peanut. They all want a peanut.
That's it, man.
Hello, lady. We're talking about.
Again, if I'm building a tourist attraction and it's a big thing that everybody wants to look at, imagine Andre on there.
Man. Let me ask you this: a 6'4" Andre, does he get the job for Princess Bride? Fuck no, he doesn't.
That's like but that's not fair. That's not fair. That's like saying, what if Ric Flair was 8 foot tall? Like that doesn't make sense.
If Ric Flair was 8 foot tall, he would belong in this spot even more than he does right now.
I mean, I think the spot belongs to Flair, but I think there's still a solid argument for Andre.
I appreciate that.
So I tell you what. So maybe we can put Flair on the mountain and have Andre be the mountain. Maybe Andre is the mountain that everyone's built on.
4 wrestlers.
Yeah, exactly.
You've seen that picture of Andre holding up the
the lady.
Whatever like that.
Hey, fellas, go ahead.
Go ahead, Barker.
No, go ahead because mine's different.
Well, it's interesting. Friend of mine just handed me a sheet here, and
does he have a personal assistant at the house?
I do. Jarvis, my drink. But it's interesting when Derek was talking about AJ Styles, and Resner said, "I'll bet you that AJ Styles wouldn't even be on AJ Styles Mount Rushmore ahead of Ric Flair." It's interesting because all these guys, they're fans just like us. They grew up idolizing somebody. They grew up emulating somebody. And so the Undertaker's Mount Rushmore, Flair, Hogan, Stone Cold, Andre. That was the Undertaker's Mount Rushmore. And wouldn't you love to talk to some of these guys and listen, particularly like some of the older guys? You figure a guy like Tully Blanchard, his dad owned a promotion. And all the guys that Tully has gotten to see, who's on your Mount Rushmore? Wouldn't you love to have this discussion with Jim Cornette, a guy who knows wrestling history, who was there as a 14-year-old photographer or whatever? Jim, who's on your Mount Rushmore?
Well, hey.
Jim Ross.
You all are having these guys on. We have these people. This should be like your final question to everyone that we have. Right? Yeah. I mean,
without
you two.
Justification or anything, Rez, just give us 4 names. Who's on your Mount Rushmore?
Yeah, that's like a good gimmick for your all's interviews. We get these motherfuckers. I'd like to know what Ricky Morton's top 4 is, because that could be real interesting because he's coming from deep South territory shit. You know what I mean?
Well, and I also want to suggest that we do a tag team Mount Rushmore sometime. Not tonight.
We got to do a manager one.
Who the fuck are we going to get to carve 8 freaking eight faces into a mountain? Jesus.
I could actually say we just take Teddy Roosevelt out of there and
what I was going to say, and actually Stephen P actually set me up for it, and I wanted to circle back to the AJ Styles thing because I've been really thinking about it. I think that I hope that in 15 years, the Lord willing and the creek don't rise, we can have this conversation and we can actually have a serious conversation about AJ Styles being there. But he's just not big enough. I want that to happen.
Maybe AJ takes a run. Do you think AJ gets a run in AEW when he's done in WWE?
No, we wanted him to be a legend.
Listen, if AJ, he already will. He's going to be a Hall of Famer. And if AJ Styles goes to AEW, he'll be the only individual to win every major world title.
Is that a major world title?
more majors than WGP is now.
It is a major world title.
W champion over.
Wait,
fuck that.
No, hold on. Now, Stephen Barker, I know that you bitch a lot about AEW. That's no hidden thing
I don't think
here.
it's fucking major just because a billionaire wants to play fucking
here's the thing.
Playbooker.
Here's the thing. It's number 2.
Ring of Honor is more. Ring of Honor is a more major.
Really, because you know what, you're wrong as hell. Ring of Honor is not more major. The number 2 company, whether you like it or not, is AEW. That is. I mean, is there any argument there? Is there another company that is on a national level doing what AEW is doing?
Did Barker just try to say the Beatles are not that good?
I think he did.
Hey, are you saying the AEW are like the Beatles? What the fuck are you talking about? AEW is like the fucking Monkeys. Are you kidding me? Get the fuck out of here.
Bro,
give me a break. It's fake wrestling. It's fake fucking band. The Monkeys weren't a band. That motherfucker Peter Tork didn't play drums.
Hey, you know what, Brian? Brian Last would fist fight you over that Monkeys comment. He's a huge Monkeys fan. I heard him talking about that just the other day.
Dude, I know a major producer, like the guy who produced every Sublime record, who will fight you till 4 a.m. about how great the Monkeys are. It fucking makes no sense to me.
Here we come.
Dude, I mean,
down the street.
It's not, they love them, but not because of the reasons of who's in the band.
Okay, so
those are all great records, but the Monkeys didn't make those records.
So we know, I mean, AJ Styles, everybody here agrees that AJ Styles is amazing. And I think that the majority of us agree that AJ is not ready to be on Mount Rushmore. Now, we've talked about Andre the Giant. You know, you could say Andre deserves to be up there all day long, but does Andre deserve to be up there more than Ric Flair? And that is a big fuck no for me. Now, who is going to take this spot? Because we're at the end of this segment here. And we've got to put somebody else on this Mount Rushmore. And we are almost fucking there. Lou Thesz, Hulk Hogan, Steve Austin, and I say Ric Flair. I don't see how it can be anybody but Ric Flair. This
conversation still. Of course it's Ric Flair. I thought we had moved on to all of our curmudgeon picks. It's Ric Flair. What the fuck are you talking about? It's empirical fucking fact that Ric Flair is one of the greatest of all fucking time. Go out your fucking front yard right now and woo and see how many fucking neighbors woo the fuck back at you. Go. I've been to Adam's house. He's got neighbors. That's it.
Go down a street in any town or city in America.
It don't matter what fucking race they are. It don't matter how old they are. And Ric Flair's never been in a fucking movie. Has he?
I don't know how many of you have been to WWE pay-per-views in the last few years. I've been to a bunch. I went to 3 of the big 4 in 18. There's a bunch of boys that cosplay Ric Flair when they show up at the arena.
He's got his own Adidas shoe. He has his own shoe. Adidas has a Ric Flair shoe. I still
see getting cosplayed in 2018, 2019, 2020. Ric Flair and Macho Man.
I would say every
Macho
single
Man would be more than Andre the Giant for me.
Yeah, Macho Man would definitely be on there before Andre the Giant for me.
A bunch of honorable mentions.
We have a bunch of them.
I don't know where we're going to come down on Flair in that 4th slot. 5 of 6 of us.
I would like to hear everyone's like outsider AJ Styles pick. Rez, what's your outsider?
My outsider AJ Styles pick. That's a very interesting question. I don't think that I don't think I have anybody that is from a modern era that should be included on this. I mean, I respect Derrick Jones's pick, but if I was going to pick a pick like Derrick Jones's pick, the only pick that comes to mind is AJ Styles.
Okay.
So, I mean, I'm 100% behind Derrick Jones's pick. It's just I'm not behind it when there's only 1 slot left and Ric Flair's not there.
He's got to get bigger, man. I want him to get bigger. He's got to get bigger over, man. He's not as over as Edge or Roman Reigns or Daniel Bryan right now.
So
we haven't talked about Taker, but the cinematic match was with AJ Styles. That's who Taker wanted to work with. You know, that's another outlier that I think you could make a really strong argument on, especially with longevity. Is Taker.
Undertaker for sure. I mean, putting asses in seats, man.
I think
Jarvis here, following that win percentage. Do you guys know who has the number 1 win percentage?
Who?
Cena.
Michael Cole.
Roman Reigns.
The Ultimate Warrior at 120.
Oh, yeah.
13.
Oh, hell yeah.
That destroys that old metric.
Let's put him on.
Destroys that old metric. Oh,
Run
my God.
By the Ultimate Warrior at the end.
Oh,
somebody's tracking wins.
No, the reason why I get so fired up to be around you all and I'm so get wired and just talk too much is because I have one fucking friend, Mike Parker, Matt and Adam, who likes wrestling, and all that motherfucker wants to do is talk about the Ultimate Warrior. So the only time I get to talk about anything other than how great the Ultimate, because dude, he'll come over to my house and we'll watch some shit, and Parker will be like, well, Ultimate Warrior's better. Like, this is.
Hey, I think that's, I mean, just like for some people, Stone Cold, and for some people, Rock, like for some people, it never got better than the Ultimate Warrior.
You know, I will say that my wife just recently found the Ultimate Warrior He-Man WWE figure at one of our Walmarts, which is a pretty big deal for us because normally our Walmarts only have Cena figures and AEW rings. But she somehow found the Ultimate Warrior He-Man figure, and I just recently got that. However, it still doesn't make me put him on fucking Mount Rushmore over Ric Flair.
Hey, Ultimate Warrior for sure cut a better promo than Frank Gotch.
and Andre, for that matter.
Do you guys want to hear some other wrestlers Mount Rushmore?
Yes.
Sure.
Yes.
Roman Reigns, Taker, Austin, Cena, Hogan, Rock, Hogan, Flair, Austin, Bruno, CM Punk, Mitsubishi Misawa,
Yeah, Misawa.
Sour.
Austin, Savage, Harley Race,
Ooh.
Didn't he train with Race for a little bit?
Seth Rollins, Hogan, Rock, Flair, HBK, Jericho's Hogan, Owen Hart, Savage, Steamboat.
Owen.
Those are deep album cuts.
Angles is Austin, Flair, HBK, and Rock. And Ric Flair's is Hogan, Austin, Rock, and Ric Flair.
You goddamn right! Even Ric Flair knows! You think Ric Flair's not gonna put himself on there? And that fact alone is telling you he's the fucking greatest pro wrestler in the world.
On his Mount
Because I don't only think that he's on the Mount Rushmore, I think he's the greatest ever. He's the greatest ever. Okay, I know Rez and Stephen New did, and I'm almost for certain Adam did. Had anyone ever got to see him at his prime? I saw him in '86 on the Great American Bash. That motherfucker electrifies. Like, I've seen every rock band that I want to see, like all the fucking greats, all of them. Nobody electrified the fucking crowd. I know.
He was mythical.
Paul's dead anyway. After Paul died, I wasn't interested.
What are you talking about? Paul died in the very beginning.
Exactly. I only like bubblegum QT Beatles. That's not true. When Ric Flair came out in Charleston Civic Center for the fucking Great American Bash after Waylon Jennings got done drunkenly playing on stage, it was like what I think it was when the Beatles showed up. This motherfucker is one of the most over and was most over everywhere. Japan, everywhere.
Well, you were saying, Steve New was saying earlier, that you always, you see people doing the Ric Flair cosplay. I will say that every wrestling event that I've ever attended had woos in the crowd. It would start with one person, woo, and then boom, the whole crowd is doing it. And that's every event I've ever attended since I was a child.
Yep. Yeah, that's even more than just the catchphrase. It's like when someone does a chop in 99.9% of the world, the audience is going to woo.
Is there any pro wrestling equivalent of that when a maneuver is performed, someone else's catchphrase is uttered?
Not when a maneuver is performed. I'd say the only thing close to the woo is the what and the yes.
Stone Cold Steve Austin probably could be disqualified for that what shit. That's a goddamn cancer on this fucking business. Dude, everybody that goes on his podcast should be allowed to fucking open hand slap Stone Cold.
I want to know if Matt has any weirdo picks. What was your for, Matt?
Well, initially I'd written several honorable mentions that I was kind of gridlocked at the final spot, but I had HBK on there originally, and then I had an argument for Dusty. I think that Dusty, you could argue that Dusty could be on a lot of people's Mount Rushmore. I think for just what he did for the business, the same way that Stephen P. brought up Vince. I didn't think about putting Vince McMahon on the Rushmore, but Vince, you could argue that he could be on there
as a promoter and performer, right?
Right.
Vince McMahon would be the guy to steal the land that the Mount Rushmore was going to be on.
But you could argue. I mean, you could argue that he has a place on there. Is all I'm saying.
So if we're stealing Indian land for this Mount Rushmore, like the original Mount
Vinny
Rushmore,
Mac's our guy.
Vinny is totally going to negotiate that deal for us. So,
and when he gets done stealing your shit, you're going to be like, "Wow, I got a good deal."
Well, yeah, and then he'll hawk it to NBC for $1 billion.
Seriously, and he's going to be the Roosevelt of the group, who's going to make sure the commission is. He'll get it pushed through Congress and make sure he's included on it as well.
Okay, Derek Jones, I got to come back to you. We've been sitting here talking about many, many reasons why Ric Flair has got to be on this Mount Rushmore. And I'm really about to put him on there without your consent. But I need to know, do you at least see the point of why a Mount Rushmore is not even valid without Ric Flair?
Ric Flair, undisputably one of the greatest of all time.
Okay, then why can't you just say he belongs in the spot?
On my Mount Rushmore, he'll have a beautiful plaque at the bottom at the Overlook.
So that's what he's really saying is right now, D. Jones, the only Derek Jones that matters, is putting AJ Styles over Ric Flair.
Yep.
And AJ Styles, one of his biggest influences in his entire career is who? Rick.
Well, I tell you what, man, AJ Styles on the mic could use some of that fucking charisma because that's going to be a big old problem. Wait
a second. No, whoa. I will say AJ has a history of being bad on the mic. This is not a fact now. AJ Styles can work a stick now. He can do a program now. And I'm very proud of AJ Styles' mic work right now.
He's gotten better in the sense that Bret Hart got better a little bit later on, but it ain't fucking The Rock.
It ain't Rick. Well, who is The Rock? You got The Rock, Ric Flair, Dusty Rhodes, Billy Graham. Who are those? Who is like those guys?
Jim Cornette.
Jim Cornette,
promo man of the fucking all time.
Or we gonna put Jim Cornette on Mount Rushmore?
Easy. No. It's not even fucking close.
So, Derek, my question comes back. Do you understand why we're about to put Ric Flair on this Mount Rushmore without you?
Oh, come on, Derek. Concede.
I conceded to Stephen P.
That's not me.
We all did. We all conceded to Fez.
Could you imagine arguing with Derek Jones in a domestic situation? His poor wife. Holy shit.
Do we need to let Jarvis be the tiebreaker here, or what?
It's Ric Flair. He's holding up the fucking. Fucking exit.
Technically, there isn't Ric
Flair.
There isn't a tie.
Boas around his neck. You can tell he's wearing a robe. His hair is immaculate. He's going to look the best on Mount Rushmore.
There isn't an argument. Really?
Here we go. Okay, so sidebar, if you will. Which one of these has worked their damnedest to tarnish their legacy? Has Ric Flair fucked himself worse, or has Hogan fucked himself worse? Because Stone Cold got out of it with his dignity. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? And then, I don't know, Frank Gotch, I don't know. But, those, Stone Cold, he still is he has his dignity. Hulk Hogan is a fucking kind of a fucking meme joke right now. And Ric Flair, who cannot just step away, and I understand the idea of a performer who gets addicted to the spotlight, but Ric Flair tried his damnedest to get off this Mount Rushmore.
Flair wasted so much money.
He had to. I understand.
And I honestly think Flair's still going for the money.
It's the reason why Motley Crue has to go on tour next year. I understand.
That's the reason we were able to have him have lunch with us.
Have lunch with him.
My friends were able to hire him.
You ain't going to get Stone Cold Steve Austin to fly to Charleston to hang out with Adam Harris for a weekend. You know what I'm saying? And that's a thing. And dude, that's I think is being tarnished with Derek. And I know that D. Jones is a more of a historian than we give him credit for. But man, you were probably watching in live when fucking he was wrestling with his shirt on, bleeding like a stuck pig, like wrestling Mick Foley.
That's an interesting thing, Derek Jones. What was your first Ric Flair match?
My first Ric Flair match?
Yeah, that you watched.
Oh goodness. He would have been a part of the Horsemen in WCW.
Late 90s? You did see that live as a kid.
You're talking about late Horsemen. You're talking about the late Horsemen. When
he was wrestling in slacks
with Chris Benoit.
Remember when he was just wrestling in slacks and a black shirt?
You know what happened? Flair handcuffed himself to a rope, and it traumatized Derek Jones as a small child, and he's never been the same ever since.
He saw David Flair. He saw David Flair turn on his dad. He's like, well, he's a terrible dad. He can't be a good wrestler. Right. Fucking Vince Russo knows more than Ric Flair does.
You cut the camera, Bischoff, and I'll be naked when you come back.
That's my problem. That's the thing.
Jones when he was small.
And Ric Flair's just shitting all over it right now with this abortion of a fucking angle with Lacey Evans. That's fucking terrible. He's got to go home. Someone who loves him tells him to go the fuck home. And Triple H does. We know that.
Pay him to stay at home.
Please.
If I'm Triple H, I pay him to stay in Charlotte.
Because he is destroying his legacy. Because if we were to, again, let someone who's never watched wrestling at all and let them hear this, and then for some reason they watch Monday and they see this decrepit old man who's fucking almost out of it as much as fucking Joe Biden come down the fucking ramp, and they're gonna be like, this is your king? This is your king?
I wish that he must not be able to translate or any of this knowledge that we give him credit for. You know, like, shouldn't he be an agent? Like, shouldn't he be helping some of these guys build matches?
Man, you can't make Axl Rose into a roadie, man. You can't make Axl Rose into a roadie.
But himself.
What is it?
He said he doesn't want to help anybody but himself right now.
That's a good point.
He's right. That's a good point.
Where I want to see him end up is AEW. I wish that this whole Andrade, Charlotte, Ric Flair thing would have led to all three of them going to AEW, because having Ric Flair show up and cut a promo for Pinnacle and be a part of that would be great TV.
Do not wish that horrific idea of that spawn of Flair on my AEW.
Oh, wow.
I agree, but for completely, entirely
wait a minute.
reasons.
You mean don't wish that Charlotte would come and make the AEW women's division actually a division and not have to fucking destroy each other with tables to get any type of attention?
Who would she wrestle? Nobody can fucking none of those
I would
girls
love
can wrestle.
I'd love to see Britt Baker versus Charlotte Flair.
She might be able to carry her to something.
Yeah, but then what?
Yeah,
hey, how about this? What if Ric Flair, stay with me, goes to the NWA?
Hey.
They would get more than 14,000 views for sure. They would get more than 14,000 views.
Yeah, that's true.
they would
and
probably
I think that would be a whole nother addition to his legacy, if done right, that we would all be talking about. Like, Billy Corgan to me needs to make it happen.
I want him to go home.
Derek Jones, have you watched my Ric Flair music video? Maybe that can change.
Several times. I have.
Maybe that's why he does
Nobody
it.
else on Rushmore had Matt Mullins write a song about them.
That's true.
There you go.
I got an Abdullah the Butcher song, but that doesn't. That's different.
So now that we've got our mostly agreed upon.
Yeah, we've got
give us our own. Like our personal four?
Sure, we can do that. We can do that right now since we've got the official final list. It's Luthez, Hulk Hogan, Stone Cold Steve Austin, and even though Derek Jones will not come to reality, Ric Flair.
But he does have a good-looking dog, so we'll let it pass.
Go ahead. What is your four, Stephen Barker?
Adam Harris, you owe me a beer next time I see you, brother.
Are you putting Jericho on the list?
Shh. It's Ric Flair. It's fucking Stone Cold Steve Austin. And again, this is personal. Fucking Kurt Angle and Chris Jericho, motherfuckers. No matter how much Jericho's trying to get off my list, he's trying to get off my list on a daily basis.
I agree.
That's how great he is he's not fucked it up. And Adam Harris, you're going to put a shot on top of it because my fifth guy out is William motherfucking Regal. Those are my 4+1. William Regal.
Okay. William Regal's your honorable mention.
He is. He's not even, he was never as big as even AJ Styles, but he's a goddamn genius. He's a fucking genius in the ring.
Okay, Adam Harris, since he is talking to you, what is your four?
I would always argue for a Jericho spot for sure, because I feel like when it comes to adapting your character, remaining relevant, I feel like Jericho deserves to be in the conversation, especially with the AEW, how he's carried the load there. I did not put him in my final four. I feel like I was I was on the fence of. I was going to go Hulk Hogan, who invented pay-per-view. I was going to go Steve Austin, who captured the zeitgeist of every American who wanted to say, take this job and shove it. I was going to say Flair because he tells the story of the territories, Mid-South, multiple runs, and his run went way longer than any of us expected to. And then for me, if I'm building an attraction and it's going to be a tourist destination where all these faces are ingrained in granite, it's going to be Andre the Giant.
All right.
What's your fifth? What's your fifth one? What's your off?
His fifth is Jericho.
Taker, Jericho. I mean, you can make any argument.
All right, Matt Mullins.
I also love Regal, and we didn't talk about him, but Kane.
Oh my God, I would never put Kane on a fucking no way. No way. I can't even accept that as a fifth. Matt Mullins. I accept William Regal as a fifth before I accept Kane. Matt Mullins, you're four.
I would go with, let's see, there's my list brought up there. I went with Hogan. Of course, I was a Hulkamaniac. Flair, Austin, and HBK.
HBK. What would you be your fifth wild card?
I would probably put Andre as my wild card. I had a lot of honorable mentions, but I can make the argument for Dusty. I could make it for Macho Man. So I don't know.
Butcher.
Yeah.
Okay, Derek Jones, you
Cuban.
Yes.
Derek Jones, you pretty much gave us your four, correct?
Well, I gave three that I figured everybody would go with. I kind of thought everybody was going to go with Hogan, Rock, and Austin to start, but like my list that's actually wrote down of my four, and the one that I had to just really struggle not putting him on there would be just my four favorite wrestlers, pretty much of all time. So Hogan is not on actually my list.
Okay, so who's on your list?
So my list consists of AJ Styles, Randy Savage, the Great Muta, Chris Jericho.
I like Great
Look
Muta
at us,
being on
Derek
there.
Jones.
I like
Look
Great
at
Muta
us.
being on there. I like that.
Shaking hands across aisles. We're
Okay.
better than
I
the
feel
goddamn
bad.
Senate.
I should have lobbied better for Jericho. I feel like I had the votes.
I can't believe you, Adam Harris.
All right, Stephen P. New, you're four.
I am going to go Bizarro World on you guys.
Oh God.
The Bizarro World, the mirror of the four we chose: Bruno Sammartino, Dusty Rhodes, Roddy Piper, and The Rock.
And The Rock. Wow. So that's the mirror of what we actually picked and put on.
The mirror of what we chose. Now, I'm not saying the American Dream, Dusty Rhodes is my favorite wrestler.
I was going to say, would you say those are your four favorites then?
Not Bruno necessarily, because I probably like Superstar Billy Graham better than I like Bruno from that era, rather.
I agree.
I wanted to talk about him as an influence, especially because the Hulk Hogan thing doesn't really happen without Superstar Billy Graham.
Does Hulk Hogan happen? Does Dusty Rhodes happen?
Thunderbolt Patterson.
What do you mean?
Thunderbolt Patterson was the wrestler that Dusty Rhodes got all of that jive from.
Oh, really? It wasn't Billy Graham? Billy Graham too?
Nah, dude.
He got a lot from Billy Graham.
Thunderbolt Patterson, bro. All that.
Muhammad Ali got stuff from Billy Graham.
The music that we love, it was of course adapted from the black culture.
It was all that stuff was him. Remember, Dusty talks like that. That motherfucker's from North Texas. They don't talk like that in North Texas, right? He got that from somewhere.
Yeah.
Okay,
so we're not talking about Bobo Brazil right now either.
Yeah, go and watch a Thunderbolt Patterson and we'll hear it.
Talk about the shit.
Oh God, man, I love them.
As far as my Mount Rushmore, I would say that it's pretty dead on with the Mount Rushmore we picked. I would say other than the selections we picked, if I was going to pick a fifth wild card that was just for me, actually tell you what, since we've already picked that Mount Rushmore, I'll tell you what my personal, if it was going to be my personal, it would be
Rick Rude's,
Ric Flair, Rick Rude.
Oh my God.
Ric Flair, Rick Rude. I would also, what did you say? We're going with all Ricks? No, it's not all Ricks.
And Rick Rubin.
And Rick Rubin.
If I was going to pick a Mount Rushmore, it would be Ric Flair, Hulk Hogan, Rick Rude, and Shane Douglas. That would be my picks for me personally as a fan. But of course,
plugs in. Rex Rez is getting his plugs in.
When Brian makes this Mount Rushmore, he's going to have a plaque at the bottom. It's just going to have every wrestler from 92 WCW that was on the roster.
Is there a place for the dynamic dudes in there for his tag team?
Definitely not. That was over before 92. So, but yeah, that would be my pick if I was doing personal picks just of my favorite wrestlers. And the reason why I put Shane on there is because Shane was a really big deal to me. I was an ECW diehard. So, like Derek Jones is with AEW, I was with ECW.
Me too. Absolutely.
The difference between those fan bases is like when AEW gets mad, they like cry on the internet and make memes. An ECW fan might fucking cut you for talking shit. That was the difference between the two.
Yeah, ECW fans were
including Austin, is even though he had a short stint in ECW, I feel like, a very impactful one that's looked back on very fondly, and again, telling the story, you've got Austin with that little run through ECW on his way into WWE. It tells really well.
Did he ever have a match in ECW or did he just cut promos?
Yeah, he had matches, but they never show any of it. I can't remember who he fought, but it wasn't very many.
Mikey Whipwreck was one that comes to mind the most. Yeah, he kind of got Whipwreck over.
Was it aired?
Yeah. I don't remember. I was not an ECW watcher. I only say that, looking back, and that's again with the narrative that WWE has helped paint.
There was also a feud between Steve Austin and Sandman. I mean, there's a lot of Steve Austin stuff on there. I mean, it was a brief little spot in ECW, but he did wrestle.
Okay, so I thought maybe he was just cutting promos.
But the reason why you think that is because when he first got there, he was injured, and that's all he did was cut promos. But when he became cleared to wrestle, he could wrestle again in ECW, and he was just there for a little bit of time before the WWE was like, "We're going to pick this guy up."
It was like he was about to become Stone Cold. They turned him into Ringmaster, and then eventually he needed to go back and be Stone Cold, which thank God.
Yeah, well, the Steve Austin, the Steve Austin in ECW was a little bit more corny than Stone Cold. It was more of a heelish. It was more of a chicken shit heel role than badass heel role that he had in WWE.
A little bit more like Brian Pillman too. Yeah, it was kind of like when he cut those promos on Kevin Sullivan.
Exactly.
That my favorite the promo Stone Cold ECW promo was when he's dressed as Bischoff and he's like, "Welcome to WCW where the big boys play with each other."
Classic.
Okay, well we have really chalked this out, and we've got a final Mount Rushmore that we call our definitive Mount Rushmore here on this special edition of House of Kayfabe, where we discussed the final Mount Rushmore. And guys, thank you so much for being with me here, and I'm glad that we've got this sorted out. We'll have more special editions to come here on House of Kayfabe, so keep it locked to the Kayfabe stream, and we will see you on the next edition of House of Kayfabe.
House of Kayfabe.
I take it to the edge, I do it till it bleeds. I push it to the limit, I ain't ever gonna sleep. I'm ready for a fight, I live it on the run, 'cause it's hard to see the light down the barrel of a gun. I take it like a drug, you try to kill the pain. Addicted to the damage, I ain't ever gonna change. 'Cause what I want is on in me, like a nightmare.
This has been a product of Superior Radio Network.
At the Law Office of Stephen New, we take a team approach to your case.
Our staff and paralegals are excellent and will assist you through every step of your case.
We employ world-class experts to make sure that your case is developed to its maximum value.
When you seek legal counsel, choose Stephen New and his team. They'll work together to achieve the best results for your